Hey folks, I've often said that for me, one of the primary advantages of mirrorless is the ability to, via adapter, put a whole range of different lenses on the camera and take advantage of all the features they have. Now, I don't actually own a mirrorless camera yet, but I do own a bunch of different adapters that I've bought along the way to be able to use my lenses on cameras that I've gotten in to test. Today we're filming with the GH4 and I want to show you the advantage of using something like the Metabones Speedbooster for Micro Four Thirds compared to a standard basic adapter.
To see where I'm headed next in the world, jump over to mattgranger.com, click on the Workshop and Events tab, and all of my travels are listed there. You can see next up I'm headed to Europe, Amsterdam, Edinburgh, Manchester and London.
Okay, so just to make sure we're all on the same page here, let me give you a quick primer. All camera systems are built with a specific flange distance required. So, flange distance is the distance from the mount of your lens to your sensor or film, and it's specific to like 1/10 of a millimeter or something. That's how the distance that the lenses are then designed to throw their circle of light out the back to cover your sensor or film, so that it's sharp at that exact distance. So for example, the Nikon F mount has a flange distance of 46.5 millimeters. So it needs 4.5 centimeters of distance between there and the film plane or the sensor. So we've got a big mirror box in there which takes up all of that space, then a little gap to the mount, so you get that exact distance. Now mirrorless has a much smaller flange distance because it doesn't have the mirror box there. So then the lenses have all been designed to throw their circle in a much shorter distance. So for example, Micro Four Thirds, we're filming on the GH4 now, has a flange distance of 19.25 millimeters. So that gives us around 27 mil of difference. So that is the precise size that adapters are going to be made. Then you put the adapter onto the back of your lens, then onto the camera, and that then gives you the distance you need to get the image sharp. I hope that makes sense. And because I haven't heard of a single lens out there that has a flange distance less than, Micro Four Thirds or other mirrorless. So you can pretty much use any of those lenses on the systems. Cool. So now let's jump into it and just talk through some of the other aspects here. So if you're using a simple adapter like this one, I picked it up for 15 or 20 bucks off eBay. They're made of aluminium. They're painted matte on the inside, or they should be matte black. So then they cut down on internal reflections. And all they do is create that space so you can use a different lens on there. Most of the cameras will give you still peaking and in-body stabilization, all of that will still work. So you get all of those benefits and they can meter, but they're not smart adapters. They don't transfer lens information. And the big downer for one like this one, if we take a look at it on my 85mm G lens from Nikon, you can see there's nowhere to control aperture. The lens doesn't have an aperture dial built in, and then the adapter, it doesn't have it either. So with Nikon, that means you're stuck at f/16 because all the Nikon lenses are built to close down when they're not in use. So unless you're shooting landscapes or something where you need a huge depth of field, that can be really impractical. So let me talk you through the Metabones Speedbooster. First off, Metabones is the brand. Speedbooster is one of the series they offer. I have no affiliation to Metabones. I bought this one myself from Adorama. Essentially, there's a couple of advantages in my mind. First of all, it's much better built than most of the other adapters I've ever tested. This one is machined from brass rather than aluminium, and it just feels really durable. You'll note on the bottom, it's got a tripod foot. Let's say if I was using my 85mm Otis and then attaching it onto a little mirrorless camera, obviously it's going to be front heavy. You probably don't want to have the tripod foot underneath the camera, so at least this moves it a little bit forward. Maybe still not right in the center. It's going to depend on what lens you're using. The last thing about this one in terms of design, you'll see on top it has a D-click aperture there. Really handy for this. That means you can use it on your G lenses, your F lenses, your AI, your non-AI lenses, and it gives you aperture control. So that's really handy so you're not stuck shooting at f/16 like you are with a dumb adapter. Now this next part's going to get a little bit technical. I'll try and keep it simple and you can fast forward this if you're not into that kind of stuff. So a full frame lens like this is throwing out a circle of light that's big enough to cover the 35mm sensor size. But because Micro Four Thirds and a lot of the mirrorless out there are using smaller sensors, most of that light's being wasted. We're only catching the central part, which is where the crop factor comes in, which I'm going to explain later. But what this does, it takes that big circle of light and compresses it down like a magnifying glass so that it's only covering the Micro Four Thirds size. That has a couple of implications. The first one is it takes all of that light and compresses it down. If you kept compressing things down, that's how people end up, cooking ants or creating laser beams. It's making the light more intense. So you actually get an extra stop of light with this. So if I'm shooting on my 55mm 1.4 and I have it wide open at 1.4 attached to my Nikon D810, then I'm getting f1.4 worth of light. If I put it on the Speedbooster and attach it to the Lumix, it's compressing that down and I'm getting the equivalent of f1 worth of light. So we're going to test that do some manual exposure things to actually show how that's working. But that's something. The corollary is, aperture, we always think about depth of field. Now here's where it gets a little bit technical. It's a bit confusing what impact this is exactly going to have on your depth of field. Take a look at this Q&A from the Metabones website. It's incredibly wordy. It looks like it was written by an anal retentive photographer / lawyer. But essentially they're saying, you can pause that and go back if you want, that the depth of field is going to be equivalent using this on a Micro Four Thirds as it would be just using that lens on a full frame camera. Now the caveat on that is, and this is something I've said before too, you have to talk about the actual frame that you're shooting. It doesn't make sense to compare, I'm standing in the same spot, my subject's standing in the same shot, and then compare different lenses or different adapters, that kind of thing, if the frame keeps changing, because that's what we're shooting. If I was shooting an 85mm headshot, let's say maybe on a full frame, I might need to be 2 meters away. If I was shooting it just on Micro Four Thirds with a normal adapter, I'm getting a 2x crop factor, so I need to go back 4 meters to get the same frame. Now shooting f1.4 2 meters away or f1.4 4 meters away, I get a much shallower depth of field the closer I am. That's true for every lens. This, however, as well as giving you a 2x or an extra stop of light, it also gives you a reverse crop factor. So instead of having a 2x crop factor, this brings it back to a 1.42 crop factor. So this actual piece has a 0.71 crop factor. It's all getting a little bit confusing. But let's make it simple. Let's say I was shooting an f1.4 100mm lens. I don't know if that even exists. On full frame, I'm getting 100mm field of view and an f1.4 worth of light, and the associated depth of field when I'm shooting with it, okay? If I put that lens onto my Panasonic Lumix or my whatever Micro Four Thirds, then it's going to become, I'm going to get a field of view of 200mm and still 1.4 worth of light. If I throw this adapter on, it's going to become a 142mm lens and give me an f1 worth of light. Okay, so to fix all of that up, it means to get the same frame using this adapter, I need to go closer than I would if I was using just a dumb adapter. I hope that makes sense, because you've got a 1.4 crop factor instead of 2 crop factor. So I'm not sure how they get to the conclusion that you're going to end up with the same depth of field, because if I was shooting this lens on a full frame camera, I'd be at 2 meters away instead of 2.8 meters away or 4 meters away with the standard one. I hope all of that made sense. Anyway, the last benefit that Metabones claim is an increase in Mtf performance of your lens, which I honestly find almost impossible to believe. I guess the argument would go that if you were getting a resolution of X lines of data on your 35mm sensor and then you compress that down to a smaller sensor, you're effectively getting that many lines of resolution, so it's compressed in, so it works out to be higher. But that would mean that the 4 pieces of optics in this need to be as good or better than the optics in my lens. Otherwise they can't transmit what it can transmit. So I'm a bit reticent to believe that that's actually true. But we're going to do images, show sharpness, show the resulting image quality, and do some bokeh tests in video and stills, and let's see how it performs in the real world. Okay, so to get things rolling, I'm going to start off shooting just some really tight headshots of Justin here with the 85mm Otis. in all of the tests, I'm going to compare using the basic adapter and how the results are, how it looks, then switching to the Metabones without moving the tripod, take a shot, and then correct it by going forward so that we replicate the frame from the first shot and then look at the results. So here, it's controlled lighting, but we're not using the flash there. It's just being used for continuous. We're shooting wide open. Here we are with the simple adapter.
So here we are using the simple adapter on Justin. That's wide open. It's hard to, we can't really see depth of field here, but you can see the sharpness to an extent. There we are switching to the Metabones, and you see it got wider and a whole lot brighter. That's the extra stop of light creeping in. There we are correcting the light, and then here we are moving right in to correct the frame. Okay, now let's put it in the original side by side. The Metabones will be on the right in each of these examples. So it's hard to tell is it any better, but it certainly doesn't seem worse. We did a bunch of different tests today whilst the cat was attacking the background there, and found the results are good, and you could notice faster fall off when using the Metabones correcting the distance. And look, either way, there's a huge amount of detail there. There we are using the standard adapter, and then there we are with the Metabones Speedbooster, correcting the frame. Then going in on 100% crops on these, there's oodles of detail. There's the standard, and then there's the Metabones. Throwing them side by side, there's not much in it, but I'm not sure. They're both performing spectacularly.
Okay, so studio is one thing, but let's take a look outside and see how they perform. Okay guys, so we've come out to shoot in the park. Now I've got the 85mm Otis and the Panasonic GH4. I'll be punching in 100% to get good focus and that kind of thing. This is more to do with the fall off and the blur in these kind of shots. We'll use each of the different adapters. Reason I got the Otis, it has the aperture thing there, so I can shoot them both at 1.4 and really see the results.
Okay, so this first shot is taken with the simple adapter at 1.4, and you can see just a beautiful fall off even with the 2x crop factor there and being far away. Then when I switched it to the Metabones, you see the frame just got wider and a whole lot brighter. Let's just throw back the original one, and there's the Metabones one again. So you can really see what that stop of light is doing, and that the blur is still really lovely in the background. And then here, moving in closer to correct the frame, you can see the background really gets soft, and there is an advantage to that reverse crop factor on the Metabones. Okay, here I chose an even more messed up background. There we are with the standard adapter. There we are switching to the Metabones, although I took out the extra stop of light on that one. And then here we are going in closer to correct the frame. Now let's put them side by side. The Metabones on the right and the original on the left, and you can see the difference in the background blur there. Let's take a look how they do in video.
Okay, now this should make things a little bit more interesting. Here, I've framed it up with a bunch of blur, trees in the background to show really how much we can blur it out. This is the simple adapter. Let's throw it wide open. And again, you notice the aperture clicking. Okay, but you can see it's really getting really nice and soft in the background. Probably it's overexposing here. See if we can turn that down. Okay, there we go. So that's about the best we can get with the simple adapter. Let's throw on the Metabones. Okay, here we are with the Speedbooster. You notice it's a lot wider as we open it up with our declicked aperture. Okay, there we are, wide open. So nice, hard to tell what the bokeh is really looking like compared to the other one yet, but let's go in and correct the frame. So there we are with the Speedbooster on and the frame corrected, and it certainly does seem softer in the background. It's great to be able to throw a messy old background into something lush and usable like that. You're so lush.
Side by side, Metabones on the right, simple adapter on the left. You can see the fall off there.
Okay, let's do a simple exposure test here. I'm shooting in manual exposure mode. This is at 1/2500th of a second frame rate, ISO 200 and wide open on the lens with the Speedbooster. There's a little cross section of the front part of my car. Now let's go in and use the standard adapter, and we should see that it's darker and quite a lot tighter. There we are with the standard adapter, and that's, you know, as I said, it's a lot tighter in there and less exposure, pretty clearly showing the difference that the Speedbooster is making.
Finally, outdoors, I just did some simple flare tests to see how it, whether the Metabones was introducing anything. As it has glass elements in there, there's a chance of it, and a simple adapter could too with internal reflections. This first one is with the simple adapter. You can see what's going on there, and then here we are with the Metabones. And for my money, the Metabones is introducing more flare. Those 4 glass elements, don't have the same quality coatings as a lens like the Otis has.
Okay, so having tested the Metabones quite extensively, admittedly only over a few days and little tests here and there as I had equipment in, I'm really impressed with it. If you're using a smaller than full frame sensor and you have full frame lenses, you get that Speedbooster advantage. There is a definite light advantage there. If you're using micro four thirds, you're talking about a whole stop. If you're using APS-C, it'll be a bit less. You also get the extra blur from your lenses because you're able to move closer because of the reverse crop factor. Great stuff. To be honest, I bought this one for micro four thirds because I thought I may go that way with 4K video, but with so many options coming out now, I'm not sure if I actually will. So this may end up on eBay with a couple of days use. But I think if you were going to get an adapter anyway, something like the Speedbooster is a great option because, well, there's other advantages than the Speedbooster part if you were to get the standard Metabones one. The built-in aperture control is great, so I can use all of my G-series lenses. Also, it's just really well built. It feels like it's incredibly well machined. Then having the Arca Swiss plate built in is really handy, plus the hole so you can put your own plates on there. All great stuff. Now, I would love to hear your thoughts. Are you using DSLR and thinking to go mirrorless and looking at adapters for that kind of a purpose? It's a question a lot of us are being faced. I know every day I'm being hassled by mirrorless shooters or DSLR shooters who are thinking of going mirrorless about what they're using and when I'm going to make the plunge. So I would love to hear your thoughts, what adapters you're using, what different systems you're using. Leave me a comment below, and if you haven't already, please do jump over to MattGranger.com, sign up for the mailing list, and check out all the different places I'm heading in the world for photo walks, meetups, and photography adventure tours. Thanks, guys.